era took place in the late 1800s and the early 1900s. It was a time of economic, political, and social reform, and women's suffrage was one of the most important aspects. Thousands of both male and female activists got involved and fought to overcome the discrimination against women and to help them earn the right to vote.
Elizabeth Cady Stanton was a very influential American social activist. She worked towards abolition and women's suffrage. She married Henry Stanton, another social reformer, in 1940.
To be your husband.
I do.
Do you take Elizabeth Stanton to be your wife?
I diddle-a-do. As an active abolitionist and a member of the Anti-Slavery Society, I feel that we should go to the World Anti-Slavery Convention in London.
That sounds like a great idea. Let's go.
Welcome to London. Are you all here for the World's Anti-Slavery Convention?
Yes, I have my speech all ready. I'm very excited.
Oh, well, I'm afraid only your husband can come. Women aren't allowed to speak.
What? I'm outraged. I'm going to start a women's rights movement.
Very sorry. Women's suffrage was first introduced at the Seneca Falls Women's Rights Convention in New York from July 19th to the 20th in 1848. The convention was organized by local women and primarily led by Elizabeth Cady Stanton and Lucretia Mott. Stanton conducted a speech demanding freedom and political rights for women, such as the right to vote and own property. The two-day convention included discussions on women's roles in society, a lecture, and presentations. Out of around 300 attendees, 100 people, mostly women, signed a document approving of women's right to vote.
My name is Elizabeth Stanton, and we are here at the Seneca Falls Convention for the Declaration of Sentiments and Resolution to talk about women's suffrage and women's rights.
There were both positive and negative reactions to the Seneca Falls Convention. The Oneida Whig newspaper expressed strong disapproval.
This bolt is the most shocking and unnatural incident ever recorded in the history of humanity. If our ladies will insist on voting and legislating, our gentlemen will be our dinners and our elbows, wear our domestic firesides and the holes in our stockings.
However, the National Reformer newspaper expressed much more approval of the convention.
The convention forms an era in the progress of the age, it being the first convention of the kind ever held, and one whose influence shall not cease until women are guaranteed all the rights now enjoyed by the other half of the creation, social, civil, and
Elizabeth Cady Stanton and Susan B. Anthony met at a temperance group in 1851 and quickly formed a friendship. The duo began to work together to improve women's rights. In 1869, they co-founded the National American Women's Suffrage Association. NASA was by far the greatest and largest organization dealing with women's suffrage. They worked extremely hard to gain awareness and support of women's suffrage.
The two are pictured here, Stanton on the left and Anthony to her right. They also worked together to get women's suffrage petitions signed, as shown in the following clip. They received very mixed responses.
Would you be interested in signing this petition for women to be able to vote?
Of course not. It's improper for women to be involved in politics. We could grow beards.
Why, hello!
Hello there. Women need the same opportunity as men to vote. Will you sign this petition so women can vote?
Of course I'll sign that petition. I agree with those rats.
Sign right here!
Lovely, ladies. There you go.
Eleanor Roosevelt became a very prominent leader of the women's movement and became aware of the barriers women faced during that period. While working on social justice issues, she was involved with the International Congress of Working Women, which helped women with fair labor standards. She was also involved in the Women's International League of Peace and Freedom that addressed causes of poverty and war. Because women's suffrage was an important subject to Eleanor Roosevelt, she joined the League of Women Voters in 1920.
Eleanor Roosevelt, we'd like to thank you for being such a great leader and organizer of the women's suffrage movement. Without you, women couldn't have gotten this far. Thank you for helping women reach a more equal place in
You're welcome.
society.
As I said before in Red Book magazine, women must play the game as men do. Susan B. Anthony decided to challenge the 14th Amendment.
The 14th Amendment states that all people born in the United States are born citizens and can't be denied any privileges.
So if women and African American males are U.S. citizens, why are they denied the privilege of voting? Race and gender should not play a factor in whether a person is able to vote or not. I say we challenge the 14th Amendment and we head down to the polls in November and we vote. I agree!
So, Susan B. Anthony, along with 15 other suffragists, went to the polls in New York in 1872 to vote. They were arrested 3 weeks later, and Anthony was put on trial in 1873.
Susan B. Anthony, you are charged with illegally voting. You're found guilty and fined $100.
Well, I will not be paying that, and goodbye.
Alice Paul was a women's rights activist who formed the National Women's Party in 1913 during the Progressive Movement. The NWP focused on passing a constitutional amendment for women's suffrage and was a much more radical group compared to the National American Women's Suffrage Association. During the winter of 1917, Alice Paul and NWP members picketed the White House during Woodrow Wilson's presidency. After being ignored for some time, the suffragist protests became more aggressive. Alice Paul and NWP holding signs that say, "Mr. President, how long must women wait for liberty?"
Mr. Wilson, how can you have U.S. male soldiers overseas fighting for democracy when you won't even let women vote at home?
You are a hypocrite.
This picketing must come to an end. You are an embarrassment. You are under arrest for obstructing traffic.
What? No!
Traffic?
Yes, you are obstructing Hurry.
Carrie Chapman Catt was another women's rights activist. She advanced quickly to many positions of power despite her gender, and in 1900 was Susan B. Anthony's successor as president of NASA. She worked internationally in women's suffrage and then returned to NASA in 1915.
Carrie Chapman Catt returned to NASA and resumed her role as president. In the years Catt was gone, the strength of NASA had greatly diminished and was very incohesive.
Carrie, we really need your help. This organization is falling apart.
Of course, with all my experience working in women's suffrage internationally and in the United States, I've come up with a master plan.
Please, tell us your master plan.
I call it my winning plan. I feel that activists should work for women's suffrage on the state level, while simultaneously working for women's suffrage on the federal level. With this plan, I'm sure we'll be victorious.
So Carrie Chapman Catt's method was indeed very successful, and 2 years later, Woodrow Wilson finally agreed with women's suffrage.
After almost 70 years of debate, I, Woodrow Wilson, agree that women should have the right to vote.
On June 4th, 1919, both the Senate and the House of Representatives had passed the Susan B. Anthony Amendment, granting voting rights to all women citizens.
Tennessee was the final state to approve the amendment by just one vote. The 19th Amendment was officially a part of the U.S. Constitution.
Historical accounts of the Progressive era tend to overlook the tremendous impact women had in the movement had on the lives of myriad of Americans.
The number of women in the workplace shot from 2.6 to 7.8 million between 1880 and 1910.
The 19th Amendment was the biggest achievement of women during the Progressive era. It was done through a peaceful process and was the largest extension of voting rights in U.S. history.
1, 2, 3, women's suffrage!